Hello students, welcome to week 2 for PRL 300 Public Relations. I want to spend some time this week working on and looking at the history of public relations as well as the evolution of the field so you have a better understanding of where it began so you can see where it's starting to go. If you look at the course texts and the weekly agenda this week, you'll see we're reading Chapter 2. Chapter 2 in the Sattel text deals directly with the evolution and historical significance of public relations. We are reading our Bernays text. Remember that text needs to be finished in time for our midterm in week 4. So you're reading that at your own pace. You can read as many chapters or as little chapters as you want per week as long as it's finished by the time the midterm rolls around. We are also watching 2 videos related to PR history. Both of them are directly related and significant in understanding in order to meet the objectives for this week within the course. You'll see that we are completing discussion board number 2 by Friday with replies due on Sunday, as well as our midterm rationale, which is due on Sunday. When you look at the course objectives, you'll see this week that by the end of the week, we need to really identify historical significance of the evolution of public relations as an industry. We need to be able to understand and know some of the current trends in public relations in order to trace it back historically, as well as expressing influential societal factors of public relations and the evolution of the field, as well as being able to identify and describe Ivy Lee and Edward Bernays. You'll see that these objectives and the assignments this week tie directly to objective 2.1 and 3.2 within the course. When we look at discussion number 2 this week, we're looking at 4 questions that help us understand how society is influential, why P.T. Barnum is considered a mixed blessing, who are Ivy Lee and Edward Bernays, and why do we consider both of them fathers of modern public relations, and what are some issues we confront now in the 21st century when it comes to public relations. This discussion will help us kind of broaden our ideas and really spend some time focusing on what the historical significance is of or the historical significance of public relations is today. And so we want to spend some time doing that. Remember, your post should be at least 300 words with proper APA formatting for your citations and references, and you should reply to students no later than Sunday with 150-word responses. The midterm rationale asks you to share your plan for the midterm project. So you'll see here there are 2 major bullet points. The midterm, which is due in week 4, asks you to write a 5 to 6 page paper that outlines the significance of Bernays' contribution to public relations. In this paper, you need to evaluate Bernays' tactics, his use of socio-psychological strategies, as well as discuss at least one of his campaigns in details. At the end of chapter 2, there's an interview with Bernays that has the transcripts written there that gives you an idea of one of his campaigns. The Lucky Strike campaign, if you Google it, is very popular amongst those scholars that study Bernays, as well as some other ones that I'll let you find on your own. That's going to be the outside research component of this assignment, is to find one of his campaigns, discuss it, and analyze it within the paper. So you need to evaluate him, summarize him, share what some of his main strategies and tactics are, which that comes directly from the course text, Crystallizing Public Opinion. Then find one of his campaigns. They're out there. If you do Google searches, it's pretty simple to find, as well as critically evaluate them according to his tactics. So what I want you to do is to share how he shaped the field within a critical reflection. What's a critical reflection? A critical reflection is you providing a reflection that has some type of constructive criticism for that in which you are speaking about. So for this case, we're talking about Bernays. You need to provide some constructive criticism and feedback, or an actual analysis of him in a reflective way. So reflect about what you learned about him and his book, and tell me what you found to be positive, negative, and support that with additional sources and such. So there's about 3 to 4 things you're doing here in the paper. Telling me who Bernays is, why he's significant, evaluating his tactics and his use of socio-psychological strategies, which come directly from the Crystallizing Public Opinion text, then providing a summary of one of his famous campaigns and giving an analysis of what you think that campaign was about and why it was important. Critically evaluate, so analyze his tactics and tell me if you agree with his perspectives of public relations, and provide a reflection of that. You need to submit a rationale for this assignment this week. The actual 5 to 6 page paper is not due this week. It is due in week 4. But I want to give you an idea of what it is that is expected of you. So this week, what you need to do is to provide a rationale. A rationale is a brief paper outline for your paper. So a bulleted list of what you plan to go over in your paper. I will probably be looking for the campaign you've selected, seeing that you have some strategies listed of Bernays, in addition to a list of at least 3 outside sources you plan to use in the paper. Remember, in your outline, I need to see your thesis statement as well as a list of 3 sources you want to use in your paper for this assignment. So this week, this is what I'm looking for: an outline of the paper that's due in week 4, a thesis statement for that paper, and a list of 3 outside sources you plan to use in the paper. Remember, 5 to 7 are required for the paper. However, you only need to list 3 this week. The entire assignment should be about 300 words once you've done that. So that's not a simple sentence for each bulleted point. That's a little beefy for each bulleted point. If you're going to have a section dealing with the Lucky Strike campaign, provide some verbiage for that and such. Another way to add some word count to the rationale outline due this week is provide a justification for each source. If you listed you're going to use this Attell text, that's fine. Tell me why. That will help. So this is an outline so I could see you've started to think about and planned your paper. This will help me give you good feedback so I can point you in the right direction so you can hopefully earn a favorable score on the assignment overall. So as we're looking at PR history, I want to review some things. Now, you'll see in the course text it talks a lot about that public relations has roots throughout history, specifically pointing out ancient Rome and Greece. This is true. This is accurate. We can trace back the roots of public relations, advertising, and strategic communication, or communicating to the masses, throughout history. We've seen this with the advent of the printing press. We've seen this with famous orators when we were living in primarily an oral culture as opposed to printing paper. And we've seen this many different ways. We do know that Ivy Lee and Edward Bernays are known as the modern fathers of public relations. This is for a number of different reasons. Lee really developed his public relations skills and became known for his skills with the Ludlow Massacre. We're watching a video on that this week. Bernays is popular because he came around and took some of what Lee was using. They were practicing around the same time, but Lee focused on public relations from a journalistic perspective, whereas Bernays focused on public relations from a psychological perspective. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He spent a lot of his life in Vienna with his uncle, so he really took a psychological approach to how we should communicate with people. Specifically, he focused on psychology. Really is where we're looking at a sociological perspective of psychology. Primarily in this, he found that there is a science behind the way we can communicate with people and move people to action through our communication, which is a huge part of public relations. Having a call to action that ensures that we are going to reach our public in an effective way and get the public to do something. However, this really came to be in terms of a field and really get its, from a modernist perspective, gather its feet and its grounding in World War II. It began in World War I, but in World War II, the establishment of the Office of War Information is one of the first modern establishments of a communication PR public affairs office. During World War II, the public relations field received a huge boost through this office. This office was established to convey the message of the United States at home and abroad. It's the sole purpose of the OIW, the Office of War Information, was to convey strategic messages of the United States at home and abroad. The government had realized we need to make sure that our citizens and those that look at us outside of the country, so external audiences, know this, whatever that may be, about America. So we saw this through war posters, that you did a lot of promotions to buy war bonds. It focused solely on the image and the brand of what America represented during this war. And so that really was helpful. OWI laid the foundations for the U.S. Information Agency and the voice of America around the world and shaped that perspective largely through the war. World War II saw a flurry of activity to sell war bonds and boost the morale at home. Their communication with the masses, so advertisement and publicity, spurred production in the nation's factories, offices, and in general to support America's war effort and intense focus on investing as much as possible in the war. You'll see that through this, public relations has always had a huge hand in government, but through this was really what developed some modern trends and formats in developing public relations work for those working in corporations and such outside of government work. What we'll find is that if you look at the Grunt-Hunt model of public relations, it deals with 4 types of public relations. The first 2 points, press agency / publicity and public information, is a one-way communication model that was used primarily in some of the historical points of communication and public relations in the early 20s and 30s and 40s in America. We moved out of that and moved into two-way communication with the advent of some modern media communication technologies like television, telephone, and things like that, and now have, from a modern perspective, focused more on two-way symmetric or two-way asymmetric communication. So you'll see the Grunt-Hunt model provides a solid understanding of what early forms of communication were in public relations and how we've moved into more some modern forms of this type of communication. In addition to that, I wanted to point out Arthur Page's 5 principles of corporate public relations. Page was a legendary PR figure and memorialized in today's society. He focused on corporate and agency public relations and executives to develop them. He worked a lot with AT&T in managing their reputation in the early 20s and 30s. He also worked with Chase Manhattan Bank and Kenton Cooper and the Presidential Insurance and Westinghouse Electric companies. His 5 principles are still used today and still relevant for modern public relations for corporations. 1, we need to make sure management thoughtfully analyzes its overall relation to the public. We need to create a system for informing employees about the firm's or any company's general policies and practices. Have a system of giving contact employees, those that deal directly with the public, the knowledge needed to be reasonable and polite. Creating a system of drawing employee and public questions and criticisms back up through the organization's management, which is important. And 5, to ensure frankness in telling the public about companies' actions. You'll find Arthur Page's principles throughout how we handle a lot of communication and public relations today, and more importantly, especially how we handle crisis management, issues management situations in public relations as well. You'll find this to be very insightful and influential in how we deal with communication. So what you'll find is, just to recap some of the things that we've learned this today and going through this lecture, is we are spending time looking at a historical perspective of public relations. You'll find that through World War II, we've really evolved some of our modern principles of how we conduct and manage public relations. We're looking at Ivy Lee and Edward Bernays and how they look at a wide range of issues dealing with communicating with the public. Lee focuses primarily on journalistic principles. He was a reporter, so he felt it was very important to inform the public about information so they can make thoughtful decisions about it. And Bernays focused more on psychological theories and practices beginning to emerge in society that came out of some of his uncle's work, who was Sigmund Freud. One major contribution to the practice of public relations was transforming the practice from a purely journalistic-based approach to underpinned by psychology, sociology, and social psychology to reach individuals in terms of their unconscious desires, fears, and needs. Bernays pioneered counseling efforts in public relations. He felt that it was important to counsel companies on how to communicate with others. In fact, his wife was one of the leading she was Doris Fleischmann, and Fleischmann & Hallard is one of the leading and most prestigious PR firms around, that's been around for a very long time. To recap, we're reading Chapter 2. We're also finishing up our Bernays text because we need to finish that by week 4. We're watching 2 videos related to the course content, as well as completing our discussion board number 2 and midterm rationale. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you this week. There's a lot of content in week 2. The history and evolution of public relations is a really beefy section in the course, so I am more than willing to discuss any key points with you via email or by phone. I look forward to interacting with you and pray you all have a blessed week.